This is Story Recapped. Today, I'm going to explain a drama sci-fi film called Jonathan. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. In his living room, a young man named Jonathan records a video for his brother, recounting details of his day. He mentions a few details, including a new coworker and the dinner he left in the fridge. He notes that he has been feeling tired today, which he finds odd. Jonathan ends the video by asking his brother if he's feeling the same way. Jonathan then goes to bed at 3 in the afternoon. At 7 in the morning the next day, Jonathan wakes up on the other bed in his room. He watches a video recorded by his brother, John, who looks exactly like him. John claims that he's been feeling tired too, and wonders why since he's been going to bed early, which Jonathan doubts. John encourages Jonathan to pursue his new female coworker before ending the video. Later that day, Jonathan undergoes a test with Dr. Nariman. The doctor mentions a drift in his consciousness shift, which they quickly fix. She assures him that his tiredness is normal as he's getting older. At work, Jonathan receives praise for his latest work as a draftsman. His boss, Hans, wants to put him on a bigger project, but his time constraint forces him to refuse. The next day, John sympathizes with him about giving up on his dream project. John shares his frustrations about their limited time, but he points out a silver lining that their combined accomplishments will be more than most people's. This makes Jonathan smile. While cleaning up, Jonathan finds a napkin from the Rialto in John's pants. During his recording, he scolds John for not doing the laundry. He brings up the napkin from the Rialto and asks if they're feeling tired because John has been going to bars late at night. The next day, he sees that John is angry about his accusation. He reasons that he and his coworker Tom only went to the bar one night to talk about Tom's failed relationship. Still, Jonathan is frustrated and investigates. After work, he goes to the Rialto, where the bartender, Miles, immediately recognizes him as John. Miles tells him that she's not in yet, but he'll tell her that he stopped by. Jonathan tells him not to so that he can surprise her. The revelation that John is seeing a girl behind his back angers Jonathan. One day, Jonathan meets with a private investigator, Ross. Ross inquires about his condition, but Jonathan avoids the question. Ross has documented Jonathan's movements, which follow a strict routine. He works 2 part-time jobs, in the architecture firm in the morning, then as a clerk at a law firm in the evening. However, he left work early on Friday night and went to the Rialto bar, where his girlfriend, Elena, works. After the bar closed, he and Elena spent the night at her home until 5:50 a.m. Learning this, Jonathan starts stalking Elena while pretending that everything is normal in his videos. One day, Elena spots him. Thinking that he's John, she kisses him before leaving. The next day, Jonathan sees that John is pissed about not knowing that he and Elena met. John admits to liking Elena before ending the video. Jonathan tries to calm himself before recording his response to John, accusing him of lying to him first. The next day, John excuses that his relationship with Elena just happened, and he didn't mention it since he knew Jonathan would disapprove. Jonathan agrees, pointing out that having a girlfriend is against their rules. Jonathan wants John to break up with Elena, but John refuses. Jonathan tells him to explain to Elena about their condition. Otherwise, he will. Defeated, John promises to tell Elena the truth. The next day, Jonathan wakes up on the floor, seeing liquor on the coffee table and the camera still on. Exasperated, he replays the video and sees that John passed out drunk while recording. Before passing out, John admits that he couldn't tell Elena the truth, so he broke up with her instead. Jonathan coldly turns the video off and cleans up, unaffected by John's sadness. Then, someone knocks on the door. Hesitantly, Jonathan opens the door and finds Elena. Inside, Jonathan explains that he's John's brother. Jonathan tries to get her to leave, but instead, Elena dials John's phone, hearing it buzz inside Jonathan's pocket. Infuriated, Jonathan finally reveals the truth. He and John are brothers living in the same body. Jonathan is active from 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening. Then, John is conscious for the rest of the evening. Unconvinced, Elena storms out. Jonathan records a video explaining how Elena came to their apartment. He's angry at John for breaking the rules, but assures him that Elena won't return. He pleads to have things back to normal. The next day, Jonathan wakes up, glad that he's in bed as if everything is back to normal. But when he checks the tape from the video camera, there's no new entry from John. 4 days later, John still hasn't recorded a video for Jonathan. Jonathan brings this up to Dr. Nariman, who understands that John is angry and can't be forced to talk to him again. She advises him to give John some time. Dr. Nariman tells him that the brothers may need time apart to allow them to explore life away from each other. The notion has Jonathan conflicted. Jonathan continues life normally, recording his videos to John and even preparing dinner for him. He mentions Dr. Nariman's idea of letting them have time apart, but Jonathan insists they can't do that, given their situation. The following day, he wakes up and finds that John didn't eat the dinner he had prepared for him. Out of options, Jonathan visits Elena and hands her a magazine to prove his and John's condition. Elena scoffs at it, but Jonathan insists on telling her their story. They wouldn't stop crying when they were a baby, leading to their mother abandoning them at the hospital. No one could figure out what was wrong with them until Dr. Nariman found them. She was the one who discovered their split personalities and began treating them. Jonathan points out the mole-like device behind his ear, which keeps them separated and have equal time. Jonathan is concerned about John and begs her to record a message to convince him to communicate with Jonathan again. That evening, Jonathan puts a note on his phone for John to play Elena's video. The next day, however, there's still no recording from John. At work, Jonathan's new coworker, Allison, invites him to lunch, but he refuses. She asks him about his sick dad, whom she and the rest of their coworkers believe is the reason why Jonathan can only work part-time. Jonathan admits that he is having problems with his brother, which Allison empathizes with. Jonathan continues to plead for John to communicate back to him, but days go by without a word from John. He ends up cleaning after John, who's not doing any of his usual chores. Jonathan admits to missing John, but he still doesn't get a response. One day, Elena visits Jonathan at their apartment to give him the magazine back. Jonathan awkwardly invites her to lunch, where they discuss John. Elena met John when he came with Tom to the bar. Hoping to cheer up Tom, he started telling stories that made everyone at the bar laugh. Jonathan explains that he and John are not supposed to have girlfriends to maintain their responsibilities to each other. Elena wonders how they enjoy intimacy, and Jonathan hesitantly claims that they're allowed to do it without emotional attachment. Elena wonders why John didn't just tell her the truth, and Jonathan assumes that John didn't want to scare her away. Throughout the day, Jonathan can't stop thinking about Elena. He starts texting her and even takes her to his workplace. Jonathan admits to inviting her there since he's never shown off his work to someone else before. Later, Jonathan records a video for John, but doesn't mention his budding friendship with Elena. Over the next few days, Jonathan and Elena spend more time together. At first, they meet to talk about John, but eventually, they start sharing more about themselves. Elena invites Jonathan to her apartment, where they watch a French movie. He loses track of time and hurries back to his apartment before John's turn to be active. He considers recording a video for John, but decides not to. Jonathan switches the camera on the following day while getting ready for work. To his surprise, John's video starts playing. John got worried that he didn't make a recording last night, so he's leaving a message for the first time in a while. He recounts how he wandered around downtown while listening to music until a lady pulled him back into the sidewalk, preventing him from getting hit by a cab. The encounter had him thinking about their mother. With these thoughts, John finally forgives Jonathan and apologizes for not talking to him sooner. Jonathan visits Elena and tells her that John talked to him again. Jonathan is glad that John forgave him, but this means he can't see Elena anymore to avoid breaking his brother's trust. Thinking that it's their last time together, Elena kisses him. Jonathan nervously moves away and admits that he hasn't slept with a woman before. Elena smiles and gently initiates intimacy with him. Later that day, Jonathan records a video for John and admits to having his first intimate experience, but lies that it was with Allison. The next day, John congratulates Jonathan on the experience. He also shares about a security guard job that he wants to take for a change of pace and avoid any distractions. At work, Jonathan asks Hans if he can work on the West Side Tower project by extending an hour of work on weekdays and doing shifts on the weekends. Hans is hesitant about the conditions, but knowing Jonathan's potential, he agrees. At Dr. Nariman's office, she notices that Jonathan is more relaxed. Jonathan shares his excitement over his new project and is considering taking art classes. He reveals that he and John are back to their routine, and Dr. Nariman is glad, considering that it's not safe for them not to communicate. In John's next video, he looks sad. Tom is getting married to his ex-girlfriend, but John can't go to the wedding, given that it's during Jonathan's time. His new security job leaves him alone with no one to talk to. This makes John feel lonely. Later, Jonathan spends time with Elena, who is worried that their relationship is still about John. The couple confesses their genuine affection for each other and agrees to keep it a secret. One day, Jonathan wakes up in someone else's home, next to another woman. He checks the mirror and finds a bruise on his face. When he gets home, he watches John's video. John mentions meeting a stranger who asked about his relationship with Elena. The stranger was Ross, who got into a fight with John and revealed that Jonathan had Ross follow him. With no time to deal with the issue, Jonathan hurries to the office, bearing the bruise on his face. But Jonathan leaves the office after realizing that he left his files at home. Allison checks in on him, and he tries to make up an excuse about the bruise. Later, Jonathan reveals to Elena that he's worried about John enjoying life too much. When they were 9 years old, they had a third brother who prevented them from functioning properly. Dr. Nariman removed the third brother, and Jonathan was worried that John would ask him to be removed to have a normal life with Elena. After coming home, Jonathan records his apology about hiring Ross. He confesses that he was jealous of how John took life easily and was afraid that John wouldn't love him if he found someone else. The next day, John assures him that no one can replace him in his life. He acknowledges that it's also his fault for not telling him about Elena in the first place. Before leaving for work, Jonathan looks for his earphones and finds John's medicine for depression. He confronts Dr. Nariman about this, who assures him that the medicine shouldn't affect Jonathan. Jonathan wonders if John is depressed over his new job, which isolates him from people. He's worried that he caused John's depression, leading him to confess to Dr. Nariman about Elena. Dr. Nariman notes how Jonathan had always been interested in the women John had been with, but Jonathan insists that he's truly in love with Elena. Dr. Nariman, however, believes that seeing John's ex-girlfriend is Jonathan's way of being physically connected with him. She advises him to confess to John. That afternoon, Jonathan records his confession to John, but eventually deletes it, fearing how he'd react. Instead, he records a new video, pretending that everything is normal. However, Jonathan finds his office ruined with graffiti on his desk, calling him a liar the next day. The security footage has his coworkers believe that he did it, thus he gets fired. Jonathan confronts Dr. Nariman, who told John about Elena. When Jonathan tells her that John broke into his office, Dr. Nariman expresses concern over John. Jonathan is frustrated that Dr. Nariman always favored his brother. However, she defends that she takes the side of whoever is right, and in this situation, she understands John's anger. Dr. Nariman also talked to Elena, who left a voicemail for Jonathan. Elena breaks up with Jonathan, believing that Dr. Nariman is right that their situation is wrong. Jonathan grieves over losing both his job and his love. He finally records a confession to John, excusing that he was lonely when John refused to talk to him. Jonathan apologizes, but curses at John for getting him fired. The following day, Jonathan wakes up and sees Dr. Nariman watching over him. John cut their wrists and called for help last night. To fix the situation, Dr. Nariman invites Jonathan to her house to watch over them. While looking at childhood photos, they reminisce about simpler times. Jonathan thanks her for giving them their first home. Jonathan records a video on his phone for John. He first tries to keep things light, but then genuinely apologizes to John for what he did. He asks him to do what Dr. Nariman says so that things will work out between them again. The next day, Dr. Nariman reveals that John wants to be removed, but Jonathan refuses. She explains that John tried to adapt to Jonathan's routine, but in the end, this made him feel isolated. Jonathan mentions waking up minutes later than usual, which means their shared time is shifting. Dr. Nariman promises to fix this. Alone, Jonathan ponders over their lives and imagines how John leads his. The thoughts keep him up, so he approaches Dr. Nariman while she prepares dinner. Dr. Nariman confesses that she worries about John since he's only active during the night. She's been staying up late at night so that John wouldn't be alone. Hearing this, Jonathan is up until his consciousness finally shifts at 7 in the evening. The next day, Jonathan wakes up under a bridge. On his phone, John recorded a video where he threatened to kill himself if Jonathan doesn't agree to remove him. However, Jonathan is adamant about keeping his brother. He purchases cuffs with a coded lock to restrain John while he's active. This works as John cannot open the lock. Jonathan goes to purchase items at a shop, but he stops and leaves without buying the items. He then walks around the city, all confused until he finally realizes what's happening. He runs to their apartment to put on the cuffs, but blacks out before he can. He wakes up, finding the apartment in ruins. Then suddenly, he sees himself on the rooftop of their building. He rushes back to the bedroom again, but blacks out before restraining himself. Unable to keep his consciousness intact, he removes the device behind his ear and falls unconscious afterward. When he wakes up, Dr. Nariman runs tests on him and promises that they won't remove either brother. Days after, Jonathan asks how John is, and Dr. Nariman promises that he's okay. She explains that John is pushing into his shifts, but not on purpose. Given their tests, Dr. Nariman concludes that John was thriving in life and didn't truly want to die. Instead, Jonathan is the one who truly wants to disappear due to his guilt. This is why John's consciousness is taking over. Hearing this, Jonathan wants to go home and spend time with John for as long as possible. Jonathan blacks out again at home and wakes up in a cab with a suitcase next to him. The cab driver tells him that they're heading to JFK Airport. After waking up from another blackout, Jonathan asks the driver to pull over at the beach. Jonathan rushes to watch the sunset, then blacks out again. Through the driver, John asks Jonathan if he's in pain, but Jonathan assures him that he's not. John is glad that it isn't painful, and Jonathan hugs the driver, accepting his fate. Jonathan says goodbye to John, expressing his happiness that they shared bodies. John wakes up and receives Jonathan's farewell. John continues his trip to JFK, this time without shifting back into Jonathan.
This is all for Story Recap for today. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Tell us in the comments if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Watch other of our videos showing on the screen and leave a like because it helps the channel. And I would see you in the next video. Goodbye.